Right, well, joining us in studio, I'm very pleased to welcome Professor David Moore, who is a politics professor as well as a Zimbabwean historian at the University of Johannesburg, and he has been keeping a close eye on this developing story. What a pleasure, Prof. Good afternoon to you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Professor, let's look at this. I mean, Mugabe has missed his 12 noon deadline. What happens next? He's very defiant.
I think he would still be examining the results of the ZANU-PF qua party efforts to depose him over the last couple of days, which he is saying was unconstitutional. Many of those members of the Central Committee were not actually members because they had been deposed. Remember when the Jonathan Moyle gang deposed a bunch of people? The first secretary wasn't there. So I think he's challenging that. So he said, well, this was not according to the ZANU-PF constitution, so let's forget about it. But of course, he's also planning, I would think, how to reconstitute that failure. And if he gets his way, Emmerson Mnangagwa will not have any position, right? So Mpoko, the second vice president, would come in. So if the parliamentary impeachment goes ahead starting tomorrow, and this is what your foreign editor was talking about. They have to have 50% of the members of parliament agree to start. Then it goes to a subcommittee of 9 senators and parliamentarians. Then it comes back, and 66%, 2/3 of the people have to vote. So they're counting the numbers. For a while now, the MDC and the ZANU-PF constitutional guys. I don't know if you saw that film called The Democrats. It was about Douglas Munzora and Paul Mangama. Those two were working together on this impeachment process. Whether they're still talking or not, I'm not sure, because Chinamasa said something, oh, this is a ZANU-PF issue. Anyway, if you get the MDC to come to an agreement, and if you have enough numbers for this impeachment, and it goes through Parliament, and Mnangagwa is not the vice president.
That's very interesting.
Then Mpoko could be the vice president of the party and perhaps the acting vice president of the country. Because if the impeachment succeeds, the next in line, the next vice president becomes the president. So it's about the maneuvering for Mugabe's side and the G40, whatever is left of it, to either make that impeachment fail, or to make the impeachment in the party fail,
but Prof,
or and then to go ahead and have the Congress in December.
But Prof, what are the likely chances that Mugabe could survive that impeachment process? What are we looking at here? What are the odds that are at play? We still understand that he does garner a lot of support still amongst politicians, top politicians in Parliament.
He survived an awful lot in the past, in more than just 37 years. People talk about 37 years, but if you go back to the days in the liberation struggle, the 70s, Herbert Chitepo assassinated in Lusaka in March 1974. A leadership vacuum because Mugabe was not accepted as the leader of the party yet. Into the camps, a group of young guerrilla soldiers took charge of the war because Mugabe wasn't accepted. He saw them as a threat. He and Samora Machel threw them in jail for 3 years. There was another suspected, coup, a thing that Mugabe and his people thought was a coup, a year later. That's what, if you go to Chiwenga's speech on a week ago tonight, he says we had Vashandi 1 and Vashandi 2. We solved them amicably. Well, it wasn't so amicably. So you had that kind of, there's a historical sensibility in this party of how much has gone wrong and how much can go wrong. So that meeting last night, you saw the police commissioner. The police commissioner before had been under detention, right? The Chiwenga people, Chiwenga having almost been arrested, then the acting director of the CIO almost being arrested by the Mnangagwa side. So Mugabe is saying, you guys, you're going to split the party. You're going to destroy the party. Let me save you once again. The state, the party, is me. Without me, the storm. You know that famous King Louis the whatever, l'état c'est moi, après moi la déluge. He you know, there were times when he could have left. He could have left in 1998, but he felt the threat from Morgan Tsvangirai was too strong, and ZANU-PF wouldn't. And maybe he's right. Maybe he's kind of the only one who has saved them from all of these ethnic, generational. Remember, he talked about generations last night. He says, yeah, okay, we've had some problems here. So maybe he's even holding out some sort of olive branch. Maybe even the Mnangagwa people are saying, maybe you can save us because we've got in too deep. This plan is not working.
Well, Prof, in light of what you've just mentioned now, I find it very interesting that you think that in terms of the constitution there, it might be so that Mnangagwa is actually not the person to take Zimbabwe into the transitional government. But then who would be the right job? Who would be the right person for that job?
Well, it would be the next in line, and that would be Mpoko. If you're talking about...
Does he have the skills? Does he have the experience?
I think, well, he was also part of the 1970s. He was in ZAPU.
But I mean, Mnangagwa is getting a lot of support, Prof, to be fair.
Yeah, it's hard to say, although it was quite a little bit disturbing how many people started worshipping the ground that Mnangagwa walked on so quickly. Yeah. And he's no saint. But if we have Mpoko going just up to December, it's just a few weeks. Yeah. And then you have a new slate. The one person who was put on the slate to be the first, the G40 people wanted to have 3 vice presidents. They wanted to have Sidney Sekaramai, doctor. Was a student in Sweden during the Liberation War, joined the camps, got his medical school education in Sweden, Minister of Defense for quite a while, and is, I think, even now. So again, he's part of that old guard, right? The Mugabe generation, though he's a little bit younger. He was on the list of G40 to be first vice president, not Grace Mugabe. He was at these talks where your envoys were. Yeah. So he just might be the one that everybody agrees on if this falls apart. Because this is getting tense. I think the plan was it'll work just like that. And whoever was planning it for months and months and months, well, you know, the war vets go on their own a little bit, they go on the streets. You have, I saw on the social media that the students now want their vice chancellor arrested because he was seen as G40. So you're getting the factions really, really solidifying there.
Intensifying,
it could get much worse. I'm sure, I'm not quite sure what SADC can do.
But then, Professor, let's talk about this. I mean, say the impeachment doesn't work. Could there be any call or reasonable calls to hold early elections if the army is to forcibly remove Mugabe out of power?
You can declare a state of emergency in Parliament. I'm not quite sure who does that. That could happen. I think the hope is, look, December's not far away. I think the hope is this will go away with the Congress.
Sooner, yeah.
Mugabe's card is, let's do this constitutionally. That's what Jacob Zuma has said. That's what the AU has said. Please, don't let us get involved. We're going to be very confused. So that's his card.
But constitutionally, Professor, does he have any back foot or back leg to stand on after everything that has happened to say, well, let's do things constitutionally and I will stay in office? Is he still, you know, rightfully supposed to be staying in power in light of all the developments that have taken place in Zimbabwe?
It is a bit worrisome that this hasn't done before. Yeah. I mean, this hasn't been done before. I mean, it often takes a crisis to create new solutions which might work or might not. So it's a faction fight. And these issues of morality and what is right and wrong haven't been on the table too much in the past. Does he have the leg to stand on? Morally,
a democratic or constitutional leg to stand on, Prof?
If his bargaining card is, look, if you guys send in a helicopter to take me out, then SADC can't recognize you because SADC doesn't recognize real coups. This is a soft coup, or I'm calling it now a con coup because it's supposedly a constitutional coup. Yeah. And that would throw SADC into turmoil because they, well, aside from Lesotho, they haven't had to intervene. Is there really a standing army?
I wanted to ask that, Prof. Yeah. Prof, just before I let you go, a very quick one. I mean, what what should the opposition be doing at such a critical time? Because that's when I think they need to be lining their ducks in a row.
I think they would, well, the opposition is in disarray. Many small parties.
That's a fact, yeah.
Morgan Tsvangirai is not very well. The efforts to have an alliance have been mixed. I think they were hoping that this Mnangagwa thing would come to pass and they could participate in the impeachment and possibly have a transitional government afterwards. I would think they might be a bit confused now over, okay, they may be thinking, well, maybe we should wait until the Extraordinary Congress, if it ever happens, and we could win the next election because ZANU will be in pieces, perhaps. They'll still be fighting. I think the main thing, though, would be for them, whatever happens, if there's an Extraordinary Congress, if there's an impeachment, that they push, I think, for the July elections instead of kind of let's have another transitional government. If we don't have a party, well, we get a seat, we get a cabinet post. You know, it's kind of the temptation of going in for an easy ride, and it wasn't really an easy ride, that GNU we had before. To have, and then the real role for SADC and the AU and the UN would be to really step in and make sure those elections are free and fair. But you never know.
Professor, I'm going to keep you here in studio with me. We just need to go back to the live happenings there. We do have our reporter on the line. I do understand we have Mzwandile Mbejo on the line.